Welcome, sleepy brains. Tonight we're exploring why the days feel long, but the years fly. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? If gentle, science-backed bedtime stories help you unwind, please subscribe, give this video a like, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Now, get cozy, breathe slowly, and let's drift into time. Imagine you are sitting by a window as evening gathers, watching the light soften along the edges of familiar things, and you notice something odd about your sense of the day. In the middle of it, time moved like syrup, slowly, stubbornly. Yet now that you glance back, the hours have folded into something thin and quick, as if someone pressed a long ribbon into a compact coil. That is the strange paradox of time your brain lives with all the time. The you who experiences moments and the you who remembers them are not the same narrator. In the moment, your attention is the spotlight that decides how wide and bright experience feels. Later, your memory is the editor that decides how much of that spotlight it keeps. Attention now, memory later. 2 clocks, 1 life. Think of a quiet afternoon in a waiting room. The second hand seems to hesitate at every tick, each minute heavy enough to hold in your hand. Your attention has nowhere to settle, so it keeps circling the same small set of sensations. Stale air, the same page of a magazine, the hum of a light. And because you keep checking the time, your mind counts every small interval. Inside the moment, you feel every step. But when you look back in the evening, that same afternoon compresses into a single grey tile in the mosaic of your day, because memory had little to record. Now picture a day of travel in a new city. While it's happening, you are flooded with detail, signs, in a language you're learning to read, a new smell from a bakery, the way the crosswalk sings a different rhythm, the curve of an unfamiliar street. The hours might actually feel full and long as you move through them, and when you look back, that day remains wide, because memory has collected many anchors and stitched them together into a vivid scene. The same duration can be thin or thick, depending first on your attention, and later on, how much your memory keeps. This is why uneventful stretches can feel slow in the moment, but vanish later. Your internal sense of time's passing is not a single meter. It's a conversation between systems that value different things. The attention system values change, novelty, and focus. It swells when there's something to do. The memory system values structure, boundaries, and salience. It saves the parts that stand out and the parts that begin and end a scene. Between those two, you get the paradox. A day can be slow to live and quick to remember, or quick to live and long to remember. Much of the discomfort we feel about time speeding up comes from mixing those perspectives, as if there were only one way to measure experience. Notice how your language reveals this tug of war. You might say, "That meeting dragged," which is a statement about attention, or "That year flew by," which is a statement about memory. Inside the meeting, you watched the clock, counted the slides, and your mind kept rehearsing the remaining minutes, a kind of mental toe-tapping that dilates the felt present. But at the scale of months, your memory compresses repeated structures, similar meetings, similar routes, similar dinners, into a compact bundle. Your brain is efficient like that. It respects patterns by storing a summary instead of every frame. It's not trying to steal your time. It is trying to save energy and keep your internal story smooth. Yet the side effect of that efficiency is the eerie sense that life is slipping. Consider the way novelty changes both sides of the paradox. When something unexpected appears, a surprise visitor, a sudden rainstorm, a joke that truly lands, attention widens and your felt present stretches to hold it. Later, memory also flags it because it was an oddball, a deviation from prediction, and thus a good anchor for a scene. That is why first times feel big in both directions. First day of school, first home, first heartbreak. They feel long to live and long to recall. By contrast, the 50th commute quickly becomes a smooth hallway. Your predictive brain fills it in with a template, your attention tracks only hazards, and your memory files the day under another commute, which occupies very little space in recall. The paradox relaxes when you see it. The brain that predicts the world shrinks the present, and the brain that summarizes the world shrinks the past, unless you feed them something they can't compress easily. There's also a subtle trick at play in how you frame the passage of time. When you are inside a moment, your measure is granular. You feel seconds and minutes. When you look back, your measure becomes narrative, beginnings, middles, and endings. You rarely remember middles unless something changes there. This means that a day with clear boundaries and a few distinct scenes will later feel larger than a day of one continuous blur. It also means that if you want your days to feel more spacious in memory, you can teach your mind to notice and gently mark transitions. The first light in the kitchen, the door closing behind you, the first email sent, the walk after lunch, the book opened at night. You are not forcing anything. You're giving memory the headings it likes to use. The paradox shows up in emotion too. High arousal states, startle, excitement, anxiety, tend to slow the felt moment because your attention is on high gain, scanning and sampling, making the second count more ticks. Later, that same moment may stand out strongly in memory even if it was brief. Calm absorption, like being in a creative flow or reading an absorbing chapter, can do the opposite. While you're in it, hours disappear because you stopped sampling the clock. Your attention was held by the task, not by time itself. Later, if the flow state had distinct steps or surprises, memory will still keep it as a wide scene. If not, it may become a pleasantly lit blur. Neither state is better. They paint the paradox in different hues. Think about how your body participates. Fatigue changes your counting of moments. A tired mind counts fewer ticks, and time seems to slip, while a rested, focused mind performs a denser sampling of experience. Hunger, caffeine, ambient noise, posture, light. All these small physiological levers influence how much of the moment you register. You can test this gently. Take a slow breath and feel the inhale move across the back of your throat. Stay with it all the way to the top. Count that as one. Do a second. For those 2 breaths, your attention was not counting minutes on the wall. It was counting sensations, which are richer and slower. You didn't change the clock. You changed what the clock was counting. Memory, too, invites participation. It is not just a storage room, it is a rehearsal space. If you want a day to remain in a full-size form, you can help by naming a few specific details before sleep. The texture of a ceramic mug, the exact words your friend used when they made you laugh, the pattern of shadows on the sidewalk, the sound a bus made when it exhaled at a stoplight, small, concrete notes. When you do that, you inform the future you that this day had edges, flavors, and transitions worth keeping. Your brain responds by weaving those notes into a sturdier scene. The strange paradox softens a little when memory and attention collaborate instead of operating on autopilot. You may also notice how your cultural environment pulls on this system. Endless feeds train attention to seek constant novelty in tiny, low-friction bites. While that can make the moment feel busy, it also produces poor anchors for memory because the bits lack structure and the transitions are too many and too similar to mark. A day drenched in micro-novelty can paradoxically become a smooth, unmemorable surface later. You don't need to reject technology to escape that effect. You only need to let certain activities be whole. Give yourself one thing at a time. Cook without audio, walk without a phone, listen to a full song without skipping. The present will feel clearer, and the past will hold on. On the other side, routine is not the enemy of a rich timeline. Unexamined routine is. Your mind loves patterns because they reduce effort. If you add a small twist, a new route, a few minutes of sketching before breakfast, a different tea, a brief conversation with the neighbor you usually just nod to, you maintain the energy-saving benefits of routine while sprinkling in anchors that resist compression. The paradox loosens. Inside the day, your attention has something fresh to wrap around. Later, your memory has a peg to hang the scene on. Tiny differences can create real width in recall. As you absorb this, be gentle with yourself. The sensation that life is speeding up does not mean you are failing at living. It means your memory systems are doing exactly what they evolved to do. Compress predictability and highlight change. When you understand that, you gain a quiet freedom. You can increase the density of attention without forcing productivity, and you can increase the quality of memory without chasing extreme novelty. You can practice letting moments be wider by feeling them more clearly, and you can practice helping the past stay wider by telling yourself a simple, concrete story about what happened. The paradox becomes less menacing when you treat it like weather you can dress for. On slow-feeling days, dress your attention with a task that has edges. Prepare one meal, read 10 pages, fix one loose handle, draw what you see from the window for 5 minutes. On fast-vanishing weeks, dress your memory with a small nightly ritual that names 3 details worth keeping. You will still have slow hours and quick months, but you will also have a growing sense that your experience has texture and that texture resists the flattening that once felt inevitable. Keep noticing softly as you sit there, the slight weight of your body, the whisper of air, the way one thought becomes another thought and then dissolves, the quiet signs that attention and memory are already talking to each other, shaping time as you listen. Picture a quiet instrument inside your head, not a loud ticking metronome, but a soft shimmer, like a string lightly plucked again and again. When you care about time, when you're waiting, counting, checking, this instrument turns up its volume and you feel each tiny beat. When you care about the world, when you're immersed, curious, or gently absorbed, the instrument fades into the background, still playing, still steady, but no longer the thing you're listening to. That is the brain's quiet clock. It is not a single gear or a single wire. It is a conversation between attention, arousal, and memory, and the way they lean on deeper rhythms coursing through your nerves and blood. You do not have to see it to feel it. You feel it any time a minute swells like a small tide or collapses like a sigh. Inside this quiet clock, attention acts like a gatekeeper holding a turnstile. When you focus on time itself, peeking at the oven, watching the loading bar, waiting for a reply, the gate widens and the system counts more ticks per real-world minute. Those minutes feel long because your mind samples them densely. When attention turns to something else, kneading dough, reading a paragraph that finally unlocks, tracing the pattern on a leaf, the gate narrows and fewer ticks are noticed. The minute thins. This is why a suspenseful pause in conversation can stretch, while an hour of absorbed, simple craft can slip. You are not changing the clock outside. You are changing the rate at which your inside counts. Arousal, the body's level of wakefulness and energy, adds another layer. Excitement, startle, and anxiety act like a foot on the internal metronome's pedal, sometimes speeding the beat and pushing moments into slow motion. The brain samples more, because more could matter. In calm states, or when you're pleasantly drowsy, the sampling relaxes, time smooths. This is not moral or mystical. It is a practical way your system balances safety and resource use. If the forest is quiet, you don't need to count every leaf. If something crackles at the edge of vision, you count more. Attention opens the gate. Arousal decides how many steps pass through. Different brain regions add their signatures to this rhythm. Structures deep in the brain help with the sense of duration, collecting and accumulating small pulses into something like about this long. Areas behind and below the ears tune fine timing for movements and sequences. The difference between placing a foot gently on a stair and tripping. Parts at the front shape the decision to watch the clock or let it fade, choosing whether the next moment is about time or about task. No one region makes time. Together, they let you feel it, use it, and sometimes forget it. Prediction is the clock's teammate. Your brain constantly guesses the next frame of experience. When life is predictable, same hallway, same password, same route, your mind fills in most of the scene from memory and saves energy by sampling less. Minutes glide because you didn't have to check them carefully. When life is unpredictable, new street, new faces, a sentence you've never heard before, your mind samples more intensely to keep its predictions honest. This makes time feel fuller in the moment. It's not that novelty slows the universe. Novelty simply forces your quiet clock to count more carefully. There is also a gentle role for the body. Your heart creates pulses that the brain can use as a rhythm. Your breath is a larger, slower pendulum that attention can ride. On days when the internal clock feels slippery, you can give it a clear, humane signal by noticing one full breath from beginning to end without changing it. Not a technique to master, just a noticing. One inhale, one exhale. For that breath, your attention watches a simple event unfold at its natural pace, and the gate regains its easy hinge. You can do this while stirring a pot or waiting for a page to load. The point is not to force time to slow down. It is to let your counting touch something steady so the rest of your attention can relax. Think about flow, the state where you're so absorbed that self-monitoring quiets. In flow, you are not watching the clock, so the gate to time is mostly closed, but sampling of the task is exquisitely rich. A musician hears micro-pauses inside a note. A potter feels the weight distribution of wet clay. A coder sees the shape of a problem change as lines appear. From the inside, hours can vanish because attention stopped counting minutes and began counting meaning. Later, if the session had obvious steps or surprises, memory may keep it as a wide chapter. If it was one smooth current, it may become a warm blur. The quiet clock did not stop. It simply switched what it was counting. Boredom and restlessness are different from flow, though they can both warp time. In boredom, attention has nowhere satisfying to settle, so it turns toward the clock itself and keeps peaking. How long now? How long now? That peaking opens the gate wide and makes each minute heavy. In restlessness, attention keeps jumping between possible anchors and finds none, so the mind samples many small beginnings and few middle parts. This produces the feeling of scattered time, somehow long and thin at once. When you notice that, you can offer one anchor worth holding, one tidy page, one small drawer to clean, one gentle stretch until the breath softens. Give the clock something simple to accompany rather than a wall to stare at. Chemical messengers gently nudge your sense of time too. When you are engaged and motivated, the system that says, "This matters, keep going," tends to increase the rate of internal counting, which is useful when you need precision or care. When motivation is low, counting relaxes and minutes shed detail. Caffeine can make the quiet clock feel louder and busier, which may help for tasks that need alert sampling, though it can also push waiting into uncomfortable dilation. Fatigue can make the clock soft and smeared, which is why a late-night minute on the couch can flip to midnight in a blink. None of these are moral states. They are settings, and you can learn their feel without judging them. Boundaries matter. The quiet clock likes beginnings and endings because they give it a clear place to reset. When days blur, part of what's missing is a clean reset. Everything runs together, and the system has trouble deciding where to count from. This is why tiny rituals help. The mug set down to begin work, the window opened for 2 breaths before a call, the walk around the block after a task ends. These aren't productivity hacks. They are gentle frames that tell the clock, "Start here." When you give it a start, you also give yourself a middle and an end. The counting has something to wrap around. Multitasking, a rapid shuffle between tasks, messes with the gatekeeper. Each switch asks attention to reorient, which momentarily opens the gate to time because your mind checks where you are. Do this often, and you create a day made of many little resets and few sustained arcs. In the moment, it can feel as if you did a lot because the clock was noticed again and again. Later, the memory feels thin because no scene had time to gather details. Single tasking isn't holy, it's just friendlier to the quiet clock when you want the moment to thicken and the day to hold. You don't need specialized training to feel these levers. 2 small experiments are enough. First, choose an everyday action, washing your hands, tying your shoes, making tea, and for one instance, watch its rhythm closely. Feel the sequence, reach, contact, pressure, release. Notice how attention, by attending to structure instead of the wall clock, makes the moment feel longer without any strain. Second, choose a waiting moment, download bar, elevator, kettle, and practice letting your eyes rest on a neutral point while your awareness follows one breath. Instead of peering into the next minute, you accompany this one. The difference is small and immediately palpable. The minute still passes, but it stops scraping against you. There is also the way sound shapes time. Repetitive, even sounds can lull the quiet clock into a smooth cadence. Irregular, sharp sounds make it perk up and count. This is why rain often feels calming and why sudden clatters slice minutes into pieces. You can shape your environment to invite the experience you want. A fan, a distant playlist with gentle dynamics, a window slightly open to the hush of night. It's not about silencing the world. It's about offering your attention a friendly rhythm to accompany. When the rhythm is kind, the clock becomes kind. The clock listens to posture and light too. Under bright, cool light, bodies wake and sample more. Under warm, dim light, bodies soften and sample less. Sitting upright with some support can make attentive counting feel sustainable. Slouching deeply can encourage the mind to drift and drop ticks. Neither is right or wrong. Choose the setting that matches your intention. If you hope for a spacious half hour of reading, a lamp and a comfortable but alert posture help. If you hope for a soft, unwinding, dim light and a chair that holds you warmly, invite the clock to whisper. On longer timescales, your system runs on cycles, daily and smaller, where alertness naturally rises and falls. Fighting those curves completely is tiring and often fruitless. Working with them makes your quiet clock feel like a partner. Notice when your day tends to offer crispness and place tasks that benefit from dense sampling there. Writing a careful email, learning a tricky passage, practicing a skill. Notice when your day softens and give yourself tasks that welcome a looser clock. Folding laundry, tidying a shelf, letting ideas simmer. You're not optimizing, you're cooperating. It helps to remember that the quiet clock is not an enemy stealing your life or a tyrant to submit to. It is more like a chamber musician that plays with you. When you glare at it, it grows louder and insists you hear every note. When you nod to it and point toward the score, this paragraph, this pan on the stove, this hand on another shoulder, it accompanies you softly and keeps the tempo steady. When you need precision, you can invite it closer. When you need ease, you can let it drift to the edges. By learning its moods, alert, drowsy, scattered, tuned, you learn your own, and moments become something you can shape gently without force. So as you sit there now, notice one small sound in the room and let it be your measure for a few seconds. A faint hum, a distant car, the fabric brushing your sleeve as you breathe. Let attention stand beside that sound instead of the clock on the wall. Feel how the second becomes a little wider when it holds something particular. Then, without ceremony, let the sound go and rest your eyes on a nearby shape. Count not numbers, but edges. This is all the quiet clock ever needed, a simple place to keep time with you while the rest of your mind wanders, explores, or settles into whatever comes next. Novelty is the brain's highlighter pen, the bright stripe that tells your memory, keep this, while routine is the binder that keeps your days in order, the quiet structure that frees energy for other things. When you were small, life was drenched in firsts. First classrooms, first foods, first friendships, first maps of a neighborhood, and your brain, hungry for patterns, took careful notes. That flood of novelty created thick, high-contrast memories, and looking back, those years feel wide. As you grow older and the world becomes knowable, your predictive brain works beautifully. It recognizes the hallway, the commute, the tone of a meeting before it begins, and to save effort, it compresses. Compression is efficient, but it is also why a year can feel slim in hindsight. The binder gets fuller while the highlighter runs dry. Consider how prediction and novelty share a seesaw. The more your mind can predict the next scene, the less it needs to sample closely, which means fewer fresh details reach memory. In a familiar coffee shop, you might notice only deviations. Your usual mug is out, the barista shaved, a new pastry appears, while everything else is filled in by template. In a new cafe, the brain can't rely on the template yet, so it samples abundantly. The acoustics, the smell of the wood, how the line snakes, the pattern on the floor, which corner feels safe. The felt present becomes denser, and the later memory has more anchors. None of this demands drama. You don't have to fly to another continent to feel time slow. You only need to give the prediction machine slightly less to predict. First times famously expand time because they light up both attention and memory. First solo drive, first key to your own door, first early morning in a new job when the systems still feel like a puzzle. These scenes have edges your brain can grip. After the 5th week, prediction carries more weight and the details blur into a summary. You can recreate some of the first time effect by gently varying the way you do familiar things. Sit on a different side of the bus. Walk a parallel street and notice where the sun hits differently. Cook a recipe you've made before but with one new herb, then actually smell it with your eyes closed for 3 breaths. Tiny novelty isn't novelty light. It is novelty at a human dose that's easy to sustain. Routine has a good reputation among your neurons because it lowers cognitive cost. When you automate breakfast, you don't spend brain power deciding on cutlery. You preserve energy for deeper problems. But routine without texture is how days melt into each other. Think of routine as the canvas and novelty as the paint. A bare canvas is tidy but forgettable. Paint without a canvas drips into chaos. The art is in balancing both so your life has shape and color. A stable morning ritual, wake, stretch, warm drink, can be kept intact while you alter one sensory element each day. The song you play, the view you face, the mug you use. The ritual holds you. The variation keeps the day distinct. Your memory loves event boundaries, those natural cuts where one scene ends and another begins. Routine tends to blur boundaries because transitions become automatic. Close laptop, stand, walk, open fridge, scroll, sit, open laptop. One long slide. Novelty sharpens boundaries, even small shifts. Taking 3 steps back from your desk to breathe before lunch, stepping outside to feel the temperature before a call, writing the first sentence by hand on a postcard. Create gentle scene changes. The hippocampus, which helps organize memory into episodes, likes these separators. They make it easier to file today as the day with the cinnamon on the grapefruit and the call taken by the open window while the wind moved the curtain. There is a sweet spot between too little and too much novelty. Overload, new app, new route, new playlist, new diet, new project all at once can feel exciting for a day and then tip into noise, which your brain will also compress because it lacked structure. The goal isn't fireworks, it's texture. 1 or 2 well-placed new textures per day are enough to slow the felt week and widen the remembered month. Sprinkle, don't dump. Let novelty be specific. A word you didn't know in a language you're learning, a tree you identify on your walk, the deliberate noticing of your building's stairwell scent at 7 a.m. compared to 7 p.m. Specificity is a bright anchor. Vagueness slides. Emotional novelty counts too. A conversation topic you've never tried with someone familiar is a fresh path through known woods. Ask an elder for a story you haven't heard about a job they once did. Tell a friend what you appreciate about them in detail rather than in general. Write a note to a future version of yourself about one thing you hope changes and one thing you hope stays. Emotional routines, how you greet, how you close, the jokes you repeat, are comforting, but a small deviation deepens the groove of the day. Many daily tasks can be made novel by changing sense, pace, or perspective. Wash dishes with your non-dominant hand and feel how the weight shifts. Read a paragraph out loud instead of in your head. Look at your kitchen from the floor level for 30 seconds and notice what you never see. Walk your usual route backward. Set a 5-minute timer and sketch the scene outside your window without lifting the pencil. None of this is about productivity. It is about giving your predictive brain a reason to pay attention again, which in turn gives your memory new material to keep. If you work in blocks, you can weave novelty into the seam between them. When you finish a block, stand and open a door, even if you don't leave, to create a boundary. When you begin another, change one element. Lighting, chair height, background sound. Light is potent. Morning light at your workstation one day, a warm lamp and a plant the next. Your brain records the difference and links it to the work you did, which makes the day less likely to compress into generic emails and tasks. Scents are potent too. A drop of citrus on a cotton pad during creative work, a hint of cedar during sorting tasks. Scent is a quick path to distinctness. For longer horizons, temporal landmarks, the first day of a month, the first warm evening, the first coat needed in autumn, are natural novelty markers. You can add your own. Declare a first of the month walk at sunrise, a third Thursday soup night, a last Sunday playlist swap, a solstice letter to myself. These small traditions are novelty as routine, regularly scheduled differences that become the bright beads along the string of the year. When you look back, the beads catch light and the strand doesn't look like a blur. Skill learning is an especially efficient novelty engine because it is controlled unpredictability. The first week of learning to juggle or play a chord, or say 10 phrases in a new language, forces your brain out of autopilot. Progress is visible, and mistakes are informative. Importantly, you can keep doses small. 10 minutes a day is plenty, and the novelty is renewable because every time you inch forward, the task becomes slightly new. Rotate skills seasonally to keep them fresh. Spring for drawing plants, summer for swimming technique, autumn for bread shapes, winter for simple scales on a keyboard. Each season then carries a flavor that resists compression. Even within a fixed job or caregiving routine, you can rotate micro roles to introduce novelty. Monday you are the document tidier, Tuesday the pattern spotter, Wednesday the question asker, Thursday the connector, Friday the summarizer. The tasks may be the same, but the posture shifts, and that shift is enough to turn on attention. Name the role to yourself in the morning and choose a tool that matches. Sticky notes for connector day, a second brain outline for summarizer day. When memory goes to file the week, it finds distinct folders instead of one big pile. Ritualizing endings adds another helpful contrast. Instead of letting work taper into a fog, pick a closing micro-novelty. Copy one sentence you liked from something you read. Draw a 3-box comic of your day. Place tomorrow's first object, book, utensil, walking shoes, where your morning hand will find it. The object itself becomes a novelty beacon. When you wake, your brain gets the small surprise of, oh right, and engages with the day through a fresh doorway. It sounds tiny because it is tiny, and tiny is what your biology happily repeats. It is tempting to think novelty must come from outside, new places, new purchases, new people. But insourcing novelty is both cheaper and more reliable. Ask different questions of the same street. How many sounds can I list in 30 seconds? What animals are implied here by tracks, nests, droppings, chew marks? What textures can my fingers find on this block? What colors are repeated on signs and doors? How would I draw this corner in 6 lines? This is play disguised as noticing, and it creates small, memorable stamps in the day without any extra time. Because routine can be a refuge, treat it with respect. When energy is low or stress is high, routine holds you upright. That is not the time to chase novelty. But even then, a humane micro-change can keep the day from smearing. If you always eat at the table, eat by a window. If you always shower at night, move it to just after lunch on one difficult day. If you always sit to read, read standing for 2 pages. Keep the scaffolding. Change 1 rung. The brain appreciates mercy. If you share your life with others, co-create seasonal novelty. A weekly new thing minute at dinner where each person shares 1 new sensation or idea from the day. A rotating choice of walk leader who picks the route. A shared sketchbook that only comes out on Sundays. A little museum of the week on the fridge. A leaf, a ticket stub, a doodle, with a date scribbled on it. These tokens become anchors that later expand a whole evening back to life when you find them in a drawer. What emerges from all this is an approach. Keep routines, but decorate them with deliberate differences. Keep differences, but anchor them with gentle routines. Let novelty be small enough to repeat and precise enough to remember. When your predictive brain is invited to relax its certainty by a degree or 2, attention wakes without strain, and memory gets a reason to save the day in a full-size file. Over time, the calendar stops looking like a uniform grid and starts to look like a constellation. Familiar stars, yes, and also new ones, easy to point to, easy to name, quietly making the sky feel larger each night. Imagine laying out your life on a ribbon from the first memory you can reach to the moment you're breathing right now. And imagine that ribbon is marked not in equal inches, but in feelings. How big a year felt, how dense a summer was, how far a single week could stretch when you were young. Near the beginning, the markings are wide and bold. 1 school year is enormous, a mountain on the horizon. Later, the marks crowd together. The same 12 months become a slim line you can cover with a fingertip. This is the proportional life illusion. Each new year is the same length on the wall calendar, but a smaller fraction of the life behind you. To a 5-year-old, 1 year is 20% of existence. To a 50-year-old, it is 2%. The fraction changes how the mind frames it. We don't feel years as abstract units. We feel them against the backdrop of all the ones we have already lived. Think about the first time you ever waited for your birthday. It was a continent of days. Each morning carried a tiny countdown, each week a small holiday, and the month itself felt like a world you had to cross. Your brain had very little past to compare it with, so the waiting sat alone and took up space. Decades later, the same span slims because it stands beside many similar spans. The new year arrives, you blink, it's spring. You blink. A friend mentions a summer plan and you realize the winter coat has already been hung for weeks. The calendar did not change, but your frame of reference did. The ocean grew, so one wave looks smaller. There is a math to the feeling, even if you never calculate it. Minds often measure change in ratios rather than absolutes. Doubling something feels big. Adding one more to a large pile hardly registers. The first 10 books you read felt like a library. The 10th book this year might barely make a dent in your sense of time. Your nervous system quietly applies this ratio logic to duration. When you were 10, the next year doubled the years you had spent in middle school. When you were 40, The next year is a small increment on a long story. The same step has a different slope depending on how high the staircase already is. Memory amplifies this effect. Early life is thick with firsts: first classroom, first true friend, first time you knew a city by smell, and firsts create strong boundaries. Later life, if left only to routine, has fewer bright edges by default. When you look back over a long landscape with fewer boundaries, the mind draws a smooth line across it. The years pack tightly because there are fewer labeled chapters to push them apart. It is not that later years are empty. They are simply less separated in the album unless you give them captions. Without captions, the album compresses. Attention adds another twist. The felt length of a moment is partly how many ticks you count inside it. As a child, novelty made you count more. A day held 1,000 small discoveries. What this word means, what that insect does, how this game works, and the counting inflated the present. As an adult, prediction handles much of the day without consultation. Your mind recognizes the hallway, the commute, the flavor before you sip, and so it samples less. Fewer samples mean a thinner felt present, and fewer details for later recall. The proportion illusion and the sampling habit work together, like two gears. The year shrinks in the frame, and the moments inside the year shrink in detail. You can hear this in language. "This year flew by" is a statement about the long frame. "That afternoon dragged" is about dense counting in the short frame. Both can be true at once. A week of waiting for results can crawl while the surrounding months evaporate. Minds are multi-scale instruments. They evaluate big arcs in ratios and small arcs in pulses. Where trouble sneaks in is when you expect the big arc to feel like an accumulation of small arcs. It rarely does unless the small arcs were distinct enough to resist being averaged into a smooth background. Picture a shelf of identical jars. If you add one more, the shelf looks the same. If each jar has a different label and color, the new jar changes the pattern and draws your eye. Years are jars. If every jar says work, errands, streaming, bed, the shelf becomes wallpaper. If each jar has a note, the year we learned to bake rye bread, the year we walked the river before dawn, the year we wrote letters on paper, the year we learned 10 songs by heart. The shelf becomes a story. The proportional illusion still exists, but the labels give later memory leverage. A year that is 2% of a long life can still be big in recall because it refuses to look like the jars beside it. There is a bodily side to proportion too. As responsibilities increase, days fracture into obligations and maintenance. Your attention is yoked to logistics, and logistics rarely produce salient boundaries. Paying a bill feels like every bill. Answering an email feels like every email. This creates a flattening where the nervous system must conserve energy by summarizing. The summary then becomes the year's texture unless you deliberately install different textures to interfere with the flattening. The point is not to add strain, it is to add shape. Shape resists compression. Consider how seasons illustrate proportion. In childhood, summer was an era. It housed projects, places, faces, smells, wet pavement after a hose fight, chlorine, grass seeds stuck to socks. In adulthood, summer often becomes a temperature filter on the same routine. The ratio shrinks. 3 months out of 6 years in elementary school is huge. 3 months out of 20 years of similar work weeks is small. Yet the physical world still shifts massively across a year. If you pair yourself to the external change, Note the first evening you can read outside, the first day the air smells like rain, the first leaf that crisps underfoot. You reproportion the season inside your experience. You put stakes in the ground so the season can pull against them. Expectations affect proportion as well. When you expect a year to be transformational and it becomes ordinary, you remember it as short because it lacked the difference you forecast. When you expect a modest year and it collects small, precise differences, it can feel surprisingly long in retrospect. This is not a trick of optimism, it is a geometry of contrast. The mind highlights deviation from its model. In a proportional world, models grow smoother with age. You can keep your model humble and let small deviations count, or you can insist on grand changes and let ordinary days erase themselves. The first stance is gentler and more sustainable. Social context plays a role. Collective rituals, holidays, birthdays, communal meals, shared projects, once provided reliable markers that widened months. Modern life often thins these out or relocates them to screens, where variability is high but structure is low. Screens offer infinite micro-novelty that does not aggregate into sturdy chapters. You can reinstall structure with small, embodied rituals that scale with your energy. A monthly walk at the same time, a quarterly letter to someone far away, a seasonal recipe, a shared playlist you only play for 1 week each year. By repeating at wider intervals, you create a rhythm that competes with the mind's ratio rule. The year becomes a pattern rather than a blur. There is also a quiet compassion available once you see the illusion. If a year felt fast, it doesn't mean you failed at noticing. It means your perspective widened. The horizon moved back because you've walked further. That's an earned change. You can meet it by adjusting how you mark the road. Keep the road simple when you need ease. Add a few mileposts when you want recall. Let a Tuesday have a name. The rain on the bus Tuesday. The lemon tea Tuesday. The first snow on the sill Tuesday. Names are small and strangely powerful. A named day resists being absorbed by the ratio machine. Think of time as 2 paintings you're making at once. One is a vast mural of your whole life, where each new year is a thinner stroke as the canvas grows. The other is a daily miniature, where brush pressure and detail determine how rich the square looks. The mural will always thin with distance. That is built into the scale, but you control the miniature. When the miniature is textured, specific light, one new idea, a boundary that says, this scene began here, the mural gains contrast too. Thin strokes can still depict something striking if their colors shift and the edges are clear. Small, consistent deviations are especially friendly to the proportional mind. If every Saturday at dusk you step outside for 3 breaths, the weeks acquire a shared bead that the year can string. If every first workday of the month you start with handwritten lines instead of a keyboard, the months get bright corners. If every solstice you read 1 page of the same book, years bow to a rhythm older than your schedule. These practices are modest, which is part of why they work. Grand, infrequent gestures are vivid but hard to repeat. Gentle, repeatable gestures become the architecture that keeps the long view from crushing the near view. And there is curiosity, the simplest solvent of compression. Ask a different question of a familiar scene, and the ratio changes for a moment. How many rectangles can I find in this room? What is the quietest sound I can hear right now? If I closed my eyes, what 3 textures could I identify with my fingertips? How many shades are there between the color of my mug and the color of the table? Curiosity is proportion's counterweight because it narrows your focus until the enormous backdrop fades and the immediate frame regains depth. You are not lengthening the year, you are lengthening the moment, which is, in the end, all that a year is made of. So when the thought arrives, another year gone already, you can let it be a cue, not a judgment. The cue is to place one small marker in the present that will matter to the you who looks back. A sentence you'll want to read again, a sound you'll want to recall, a face you linger on for 2 extra seconds until you notice a feature you've never named. The arithmetic of proportion will still hum in the background. The fraction will still shrink as the denominator grows. But the numerator, this day, this hour, this small, clear note, can be made larger in the only ways that count to your nervous system, with edges, with texture, with a tension that lands and leaves a trace. The ribbon remains the same length on the calendar, and yet, as you keep placing these bright stitches, you will be able to run your finger along it and feel where the year thickened, where it caught the light, where the small deviations made the mural's thin strokes speak more loudly than their size would suggest. Your brain wants to be efficient, so it tries to live slightly in the future. Before your hand reaches the doorknob, a quiet model inside you has already predicted the cool metal and the faint click. Before your foot touches the first stair, the model has forecast the height and the weight shift. This is prediction at work, a tapestry of expectations woven from yesterday's steps and last year's halls. When the prediction is good, and it usually is, your brain doesn't need to sample every grain of experience. It fills in, it smooths over, it compresses. The world becomes lighter to carry, and the cost is that many moments become the same shape and slide past each other without leaving much trace. Compression is your brain's way of saying, got it. It saves bandwidth by storing the gist and discarding the redundancy. If the hallway is as expected, if the flavor is as expected, if the meeting begins and ends like 100 others, the system notes no news and moves on. This is not laziness, it is conservation. You would not want to rebuild the world from scratch each minute. But compression has a side effect that you can feel in your calendar. Days blur, weeks slim. And when you glance back, you see a smooth path where you hoped for a story. The story is still there. It's just encoded in a shorthand your memory uses when prediction did most of the work. Notice how prediction changes your sampling. When something matters or surprises you, the internal microphone turns up. You hear more of the room, taste more of the tea, count more of the seconds. When everything unfolds as forecast, you downsample. A few checks here and there. A confirmation that things remain as they were. Downsampling is safe. It's also why your commute can disappear even as you steer through it. You are not unconscious. You're predictive. Your brain is running the script and only pinging the present to make sure the scene matches the lines. Because prediction is so useful, your brain builds templates for everything. This is how a Tuesday morning sounds. This is how the office smells. This is the pattern of the bus braking at the corner. Templates are efficient. They are also compressive. Once you have a template, you notice deviations far more than the faithful repetitions. This is why you remember the day the bus didn't come, not the 50 days it came precisely on time. It is why you recall the one meeting where someone used a story instead of slides and forget almost everything said in the other 9. Deviation from prediction is a bell. Confirmation of prediction is silence. prediction and compression shape how memory lays tracks. Your brain loves beginnings and endings because they're natural places where predictions reset. The first 10 minutes of a trip get flagged as new scene, and the last moments get flagged as closure. The middle, when the script hums smoothly, often becomes a single, soft stroke. Later, when you try to reconstruct the day, you'll pull up the entrance and the exit and a handful of surprises. If you want the middle to keep more detail, you need to disturb the script, not with chaos, but with gentle edits that make prediction do a double take. A simple example: walk the same route you always walk, but look for one category you've never counted: door handles, triangles, things that cast shadows on other things. At first, prediction offers its summary. It knows this street. Then your question makes the summary insufficient. The model must update, attention samples more densely, and the moment records more micro-anchors. Or change one sense. On a familiar block, pause and close your eyes for 3 breaths. The soundscape becomes the new your brain can't compress into the old template, and those 30 seconds stretch in felt time and remain in memory. Compression is strongest under steady conditions. If the input doesn't change, the brain's model grows confident and the sampling shrinks. This is a gift when you're learning. Repeated practice lets your system automate the basics. It's a loss when every day wears the same costume. The art is to keep the backbone of routine while nudging a single variable. You can script novelty into the template. During lunch, sit with your back to a different wall. Use a notebook for the first 3 minutes of a session, even if you type the rest. Twist a cap off with the other hand. Brew a tea you've never tasted and actually describe it to yourself. These moves are small, which is why they work. They don't threaten the routine, so the brain allows them, but they are different enough to disrupt compression. Think about how prediction shapes conversation. When you talk with someone you know well, both of you carry a model of how it tends to go. The safe topics, the typical arc. The model helps you listen less to exact words and more to the gist. If you want that hour to resist compression, change the question by a degree or 2. Ask them about a place they miss and why, not just what they did today. Share a detail instead of an update. The conversation moves off script, attention leans forward, and later your memory has distinct edges to hold. The relationship becomes a place where prediction occasionally goes quiet to make room for discovery. Compression also explains the strange experience of teleporting from one moment to another when you drive or take the train. You were not absent. You were running a well-tested model. Your brain predicted the next mile correctly again and again, so it stored only a high-level summary. No hazards, no changes, home. If you want those rides to become chapters instead of timestamps, install an intentional boundary. Play one song and give it your full attention once per trip. Or decide you'll notice 3 textures through the window: glass, brick, water, before you open your messages. The ride remains safe and automated where it should be, but it gains 2 or 3 interrupts that keep it from compressing into another commute. Prediction has a sweet spot. If the world matches expectations too perfectly, you get bored and compress. If it defies expectations constantly, you get overwhelmed and also compress because the model can't stabilize enough to store details. The zone where time feels rich is in between, mostly predictable with small, legible surprises. You can engineer that zone by choosing constraints. cook with only what is already in the fridge. Draw with your non-dominant hand, but only straight lines. Write one paragraph without using adjectives. Constraints shrink the search space while making it new. Prediction can't coast, but it isn't panicking either, and that balance thickens the minutes. Your devices are prediction machines too, and they're good at feeding you novelty that doesn't organize into scenes. Infinite scroll gives you thousands of micro-deviations that your brain can't store as a story. The model stays jittery, the sampling is high but scattered. Later, the memory is a smear. This is compression in a different costume. Too much unstructured variation becomes indistinguishable from none. A humane way to counter this is to bundle time on screens into scenes with boundaries you can name. 10 minutes to read one article all the way to the end. 3 songs without skipping while you do only one task. 1 episode watched with the lights off and the phone in another room. You are not being strict. You are giving prediction a frame so memory can grip it. Prediction is also why learning a skill stretches time at first and then speeds it up. When you start knitting, every stitch demands attention because the model is crude. Minutes are wide. As the model improves, you get faster and smoother. The same period holds more action but feels shorter because you compress what used to require fine-grained sampling. To keep a craft time-rich without stalling progress, keep nudging the edge. New pattern, slightly trickier yarn, a different posture, a small timer that asks you to pause every 15 minutes and name one thing you adjusted. Growth and texture can coexist if you ask the model to keep learning rather than just executing. Memory research has a quiet lesson that pairs with prediction. The brain often stores the summary first and the details only when they are necessary to distinguish one instance from another. That is why repeated similar events blur. You can preempt that blur by making similar events minimally different in ways you can describe. The Monday meeting where you sit by the window and take notes by hand is not the same as the Wednesday meeting where you stand at the counter and summarize decisions on a single index card. Later, those differences are hooks you can hang recollection on, even if the agendas mirrored each other. In the kitchen, prediction gives you a useful trick. Change one variable at a time. If you spice a dish wildly, you've built an all-new model and your attention might tire. If you keep the dish but alter the acid, your system compares old to new and learns something specific. The experience becomes a little experiment with clear outcomes. Too much lemon, next time a touch of vinegar instead, which makes the moment crisp in memory. This trick works everywhere. Keep the structure, tweak a parameter, and let yourself notice the effect. On the level of environment, you can move levers. Prediction depends on light, sound, temperature, position. Start writing with daylight and finish under a lamp. Work in silence for 20 minutes, then put on a single instrumental track. Slightly open a window so the room has a different breath. Stand for the first email, sit for the second, walk in place for the third. These small perturbations are not about discipline. They are about creating scene boundaries that keep the day from flattening into one long same. Even the way you speak to yourself is predictive. If the day begins with, "I know exactly how this will go," the model takes the wheel and compresses. If the day begins with, "I wonder what the smallest new thing will be," the model loosens. Curiosity is prediction's friendly rival. It doesn't fight the model, it asks it to make room. One quiet "I wonder" can keep a morning from becoming the summary the night would otherwise write. Compression's partner is forgetting, and forgetting is not failure. It is how you make room. But you can choose what to keep with tiny acts of deliberate encoding. Before bed, give 3 moments a title as if they were photographs. Not a moral, just a caption. Steam on the bus window, first email sent standing, cardamom in the oatmeal. Titles are compact, and compact is what memory likes. You are whispering to the system. These are the instances where prediction handed me something worth marking. Over weeks, the captions turn a smooth field into a mapped place. Consider errors too. Prediction errors. When the world says not quite, are invitations. When the recipe fails in a small way, you have a chance to refine the model. When a plan shifts and you find yourself with 7 unclaimed minutes, use them deliberately rather than filling them with autopilot. Look out a window and name shapes of clouds, stretch, write a single sentence to someone you appreciate. The model expected scroll. You gave it scene. Those 7 minutes will count. There is comfort in recognizing that prediction and compression are not enemies of meaning, but tools that need a little direction. You can ask your model to be generous with its surprises and specific with its summaries. You can cultivate a world that is safe enough to predict and varied enough to notice. You can let routine carry you most of the way and then turn your head, just slightly, to catch a detail that would have slipped by. You can carry a pocket of gentle disruptions, a different route, a scent, a question, a constraint, and spend one when the day starts to look like a copy of yesterday. So as you move through the next ordinary stretch, try offering your predictive brain one thing it didn't foresee and one thing it can still rely on. Let it walk the known hall and then stop halfway to feel the light on your hand for 3 counts. Let it open the inbox and then answer the first note with a single, carefully chosen sentence before any others. Let it eat the same lunch and then add 1 leaf of something bright and actually taste it. The model will nod, adjust, and keep you safe. The compression will loosen just enough for texture to show through. And the day, without fanfare, will become easier to remember because it stopped being entirely what you guessed it would be. Emotion is the volume knob on experience, and arousal is the tempo. Together they decide how much of a moment you notice and how thickly it will be stored. When something stirs you, joy, fear, awe, even a sharp pang of embarrassment, your body raises its internal gain. Pupils widen, breath shallows or deepens, heart rate shifts, skin grows more sensitive, and attention narrows to what matters. The minute stretches because you are sampling more of it. Later, the same minute often feels large in memory, not because the external clock slowed, but because you recorded it with a high-resolution lens. Calm states do a different kind of magic. When your nervous system is settled and safe, attention broadens, self-talk quiets, and the sense of me watching time go by softens. In those hours, the ones people call flow, the clock fades behind the task, and yet the doing becomes rich and satisfying, like a river that carries you without strain. You can feel this spectrum in your own body if you check gently. Remember a near miss on the road or a sudden bang in the house, how the next few seconds expanded, separate notes in the sound, the exact turn of your wrist, the flash of a face. That dilation is your arousal system pouring clarity into the moment so you can respond. Now remember, preparing a simple meal on a quiet day, slicing, stirring, tasting, and without quite meaning to, looking up to discover an hour has gone. In the first case, time lengthened from urgency. In the second, it lightened from absorption. Neither is better. Both are intelligent. Your body adjusts the sampling rate of experience based on what it thinks you need. There's a helpful middle ground where arousal is neither sleepy nor frantic. Too low, and attention drifts. You feel foggy, minutes slip by thinly, and even pleasant activities fail to take root in memory. Too high, and attention fixes too tightly. You feel jittery, time crawls in the moment, and the recollection can be sharp but exhausting. In the middle zone, the mind is alert, the task is clear, and feedback is immediate enough to guide you. This is the doorway to flow. The recipe is simple to say. A challenge just beyond your current skill, a clear goal, immediate signals about how you're doing, and very few interruptions. The cooking is slower. You have to respect your nervous system's thresholds and build rituals that invite the state rather than demand it. Emotions tag moments for memory. A burst of excitement at a friend's good news, a swell of pride after finishing something that mattered, a flicker of fear when you step onto a dark stair. These tags tell your brain, save this. But the tag is not the picture. Vivid emotional events often feel accurate in recall, yet details drift. The mind keeps the meaning and fills the edges with likely scenes. You can help yourself by adding calm precision to strong moments. One sentence in a notebook, one specific sensory detail named aloud, one breath where you notice exactly where in your body the feeling is loudest. This moves the tag from big to big in particular, which the future you will bless. Flow is sometimes described as vanishing, but you do not disappear. You reassign your resources. Self-monitoring shrinks and task monitoring swells. The inner commentator stops narrating. The timer in the corner of your awareness powers down, and the field in front of you grows crisp. A painter feels the weight in the wrist, the drag of the brush, the moment the color turns from too wet to just right. A climber senses the micro angles of a shoe on stone, and the exact pressure needed to make a hold cooperate. A teacher forgets the clock and rides the students' faces as feedback, steering in real time. Afterward, you might not be able to list the minutes, but the body remembers the sequence. That is why flow is such an efficient way to build skill. The nervous system samples what matters most to improve the model and spares you the burden of time watching. Anxiety can masquerade as attention, but it is a noisy version. Your scan becomes wide and unfocused, sampling everything and therefore nothing. Time stretches uncomfortably because you keep checking the clock and the what-if list. If you notice this, you can lower the gain without numbing yourself. Label the emotion in a plain sentence: nervous, uneasy, amped. That simple naming recruits the parts of you that make meaning, which tamps down the raw alarm a notch. Then put 2 fingers on a stable surface and count 3 slow exhales slightly longer than your inhales. Long exhales tilt the body toward rest. You are not forcing calm. You are giving your system permission to move toward the middle zone where sustained attention can breathe. Joy behaves differently. It narrows focus in a friendly way. When you are delighted by a good line of writing, a child's laugh, a chord that lands, you pour resources into the moment because it promises reward. Minutes can vanish in this state, but not as a blur. The memory afterward is colored and textured because the task fed you feedback the whole time. You can cultivate this kind of arousal by setting tiny, achievable goals that deliver quick signals. One paragraph that says one true thing, one drawing with exactly 20 lines, one scale on an instrument played at the slowest speed you can tolerate without wobble. Each micro goal produces its own click of satisfaction. String a few together and you've built a ladder into flow. Rituals help you enter these states on purpose. A small beginning that you repeat, a mug placed to the left of the keyboard, a window cracked for fresh air, a sentence copied by hand from a book you admire, tells the body we are starting. A small end, closing the laptop with both hands, washing the cup, stepping outside for one breath, tells the body we are done. These bookends are not dramatic. That is their strength. They make starts and stops legible to your arousal system, which otherwise tends to smear transitions, leaving you half on and half off through the day. Clear transitions reduce residue, and residue is one of the main ways time gets sticky. Music is a very direct lever. Steady rhythms can entrain breath and heart rate, nudging arousal toward the middle. If you choose one playlist that only plays during a certain task, your body will learn the association. Over time, the first notes become a gentle shortcut into readiness. For work that needs delicacy, choose simpler music. For repetitive chores, a slightly more energetic beat can lift you without tipping you into jitter. Silence is a lever too. The absence of sound can let the quiet clock of your breath take the lead, which is useful when your mind is too loud to focus. Micro-recoveries are essential because arousal naturally drifts. Even during flow, you eventually lose the thread. The kindest thing you can do is notice the wobble early and step away briefly before you drop into frustration. 1 minute, looking at a far object out a window, resets the muscles that hold your gaze and relieves the tiny eye strain that makes attention brittle. A glass of water loosens the jaw and throat where tension pools. A short stretch that opens the chest gives the lungs room to slow the breath again. These are not productivity hacks. They are small truth-telling gestures to a body that keeps you upright while you use it hard. Arousal also shapes social time. Warm, safe connection with someone you trust often lands you right in the middle zone. Alert, playful, attentive. Group flow, a band locking in, a team solving a problem, a kitchen working in rhythm, happens when everyone's arousal rides the same wave. You can help this along by making goals explicit and feedback kind and immediate. 2 more beats, then handoff. Let's try the rough idea for 5 minutes. Call it good enough on the source at 90 seconds. Clear timing turns anxiety into structure and releases energy for the doing. Sleep deserves a mention because it recalibrates arousal and edits memory. After a day with strong emotions, sleep consolidates what mattered and deflates what didn't need to stay large. A short, calming pre-sleep ritual, closing loops on paper, naming 3 concrete moments to keep, turning down light and volume, tells the night what to keep an eye on. When you wake, your arousal baseline is lower and steadier, which makes it easier to find the middle zone without wrestling yourself. Because each person's nervous system is tuned differently, collect your own parameters. What time of day gives you alertness without edge? What foods keep your energy stable? Which chair posture lets your shoulders drop while your spine stays awake? Which sounds soothe, which sounds irritate? How much caffeine tips you into counting minutes? Treat this as friendly field work. You are learning the landscape of your own arousal, so you can walk to the places where attention, emotion, and meaning meet. When you need to shift state quickly, keep 3 small tools ready. First, breath that emphasizes the exhale. Breathe in gently, breathe out a little longer, 3 to 5 times. Second, the name and locate. Put a word on the feeling and a finger on where it sits in your body. This brings shape to what felt shapeless. Third, the one clear next. Say out loud the next very small action that fits the moment. Wash the apple. Write the subject line. Open the window. Clarity trims anxiety. Small action starts momentum. The body follows the instruction and the mind takes the hint. There is a tender truth running under all of this. You do not need to force yourself into any particular state to have a meaningful day. You can let the dial move and ride it kindly. If you are keyed up, choose tasks that welcome precision and burn off the extra charge. Organize, clean, batch small decisions. Lift something heavy with good form. If you are soft and slow, choose tasks that welcome openness. Reading, planning loosely, sketching, walking. If you find yourself in the middle, protect it with boundaries and go do the thing that asks for both care and courage. Emotion will keep coloring your hours. Arousal will keep setting their tempo. When they run too hot, you have ways to cool. When they run too cool, you have ways to warm. And when they are just right, you have ways to keep interruptions from spilling into the groove. Over time, you will recognize the signatures. The prickly edge that means pause and exhale. The heavy fuzz that means walk and drink water. The gentle click that means shh. Don't look at the clock. In that recognition, minutes begin to belong to you again. Not as trophies to hoard, but as places you can inhabit fully, while the outside clock does what it always does, steady and indifferent, as you tune the inside one to carry you where you mean to go. Your memory doesn't record life as a smooth reel. It slices it into scenes, like a quiet editor placing cuts exactly where something begins or ends. Those cuts, event boundaries, are the hinges that let a day open and close into parts your mind can hold. If a day has no hinges, it feels like one long room where the furniture never changes, easy to walk through and hard to describe later. Boundaries give the room doorways, windows, and corners. They create edges that say, this started here and that wrapped there, which helps time take shape both while you live it and when you look back. And then there are the oddballs, small surprises that don't fit the script, the bright shells on the beach of your attention. Oddballs stretch the felt moment because they demand more sampling, and they anchor memory because they stand out from the background. Boundaries are where scenes begin and end. Oddballs are the sparks inside them. Together they make hours feel spacious and months feel memorable. You can feel a boundary in your body. The sound of a door closing behind you is different from the sound of the same door settling in its frame. The first sip of a warm drink has a distinct threshold compared to the fifth. The moment a meeting starts isn't just when people stop chatting, it's when the group switches from lateral attention to shared focus. Your nervous system notices these transitions and places flags there. When life has fewer transitions, remote work in the same chair where you scroll and eat, nights that bleed into mornings under the same light, your inner editor has fewer places to put cuts. The day smears, and smeared days compress. Installing boundaries gives the editor clear places to cut without making your world harder. Start with openings. A tiny ritual at the beginning of a scene is a boundary you can feel. Place a notebook to the left of your keyboard before you start typing and write a single sentence by hand. No flourish, just a line that says what the next block is for. Crack a window for 2 breaths before a call, even in winter. Touch the spine of the book before you read and feel the weight settle in your hands. These gestures are small enough to repeat and specific enough to mark the start. Your body learns that now we begin lives inside these moves, and your attention follows, swelling to fill the container you just named. Closings are equally powerful. People often stop because they ran out of steam, not because the scene reached a natural end. When a scene has no end, it leaks into the next one and steals attention. Give endings a punctuation mark. Put the cap on the pen with both hands. Close the laptop. Actually close it, rather than half-lidding it. Stand and take 3 slow steps away from your workspace before you check your phone. Rinse the mug and put it in the same place each time you finish work. These are not chores. They're the sound of the curtains sliding down so the stage can reset. Memory likes curtains. It files what came before in one folder and makes room for the next. Between openings and closings, boundaries can be created by changing context on purpose. Light is a gentle blade. Morning light at your desk, warm lamplight for evening review, a single candle for a short period of thinking. Sound is another. Silence for drafting, 1 track on repeat for chores, a short bell at the top of each hour to ask, is this still the scene I'm meant to be in? Position matters too. Sit for reading, stand for planning, walk slowly for brainstorming. These subtle, repeatable distinctions become scene markers that your mind learns to recognize without effort. And recognition is the quiet engine of both attention and recall. Now the oddballs. The oddball effect is simple and useful when something unexpected appears inside a familiar stream, an unusual word, a new smell, a crow landing where you've never seen one. The moment dilates and your memory tags it. You can plant oddballs that are kind to your schedule and kind to your nerves. Change 1 dish at lunch for a week. Add grapefruit zest to yogurt. Switch pepper for a dusting of cinnamon on eggs. Put herbs on toast. Choose 1 category to hunt for on your walk. Circles on facades, blue objects, tiny reflections in puddles. Wear 1 item that's slightly out of your usual pattern, bright socks on a grey day. And actually notice the micro jolt of surprise when you look down. The jolt is the point. It tells the predictive brain, update, and that update stretches the moment just enough to keep it from flattening. Oddballs work best when they are precise, not loud. A fire alarm is an oddball. It also floods you with stress and may erode the day. A single uncommon spice is an oddball. It quietly relabels the meal. An abrupt, jarring playlist is an oddball. It interrupts concentration in a way that might not help. A single song you never skip, reserved for a particular task, is a friendlier oddball. It marks the work without scattering attention. Think of oddballs as small pebbles in a clear stream, creating eddies where water pauses and light refracts. You don't need boulders. A few pebbles are enough to make the current visible. Many boundaries are already present in the world, and you can use them like rungs. Daylight shifts, weather changes, streets sound different at noon than at dusk. If you pair yourself to these naturally occurring cuts, begin 1 task when the sun hits a particular wall, end another when the first evening bird call arrives. You borrow the world structure for free. Seasonal boundaries are generous too. The first day you need a sweater becomes a marker. The first evening you can sit outside to read without shivering becomes another. If you tie small activities to these thresholds, The year sorts itself into chapters without you needing elaborate plans. Objects can be boundary beacons. A particular mug signals deep work. A shawl over your shoulders signals reading hour. A notebook with a bright sticker signals ideas only, not tasks. When the object appears, the scene begins. When the object is put away, the scene closes. This is especially helpful in small spaces or blended environments where work and rest share walls. The object is a portable doorway you can open and shut. Over time, your nervous system will treat its presence like a gentle command. Attention moves here, the rest can wait. Event boundaries love names. Naming is not just labeling, it is shaping. After lunch walk is a schedule entry. The orange tree loop is a scene. Admin block is vague. 40 minutes at the window table with the little lamp is vivid. Give your scenes humane names and you will feel them arrive. You will also remember them later, because names become handles for memory to grip. If you like, make the names playful. The quiet fishbowl for your study nook. 2-song sweep for a quick tidy, so that calling a scene into being feels like inviting a character on stage. Boundaries can be as short as a breath. Between one task and the next, place a 3-breath bridge. On the first breath, notice your posture. On the second, loosen your jaw. On the third, glance at something far away. That tiny bridge is a reset that tells your system the old scene has ended and the next can begin. Without it, your mind may carry the residue of the previous task into the new one. And residue is sticky. Time gets caught in it. Clear the stickiness often, and the day advances in clean clicks you can feel. In social life, boundaries keep connection from blurring into logistics. Start a conversation with a ritual. Put the phone face down and ask one opening question you don't usually ask. What surprised you today? What did you notice on the way home? End with a closing note that leaves a thread. Send me that line you loved. Next time, tell me about your neighbor's garden. The opening lifts the talk out of autopilot. The closing makes the tie durable in memory. Shared oddballs, a new cafe, a different park bench, swapping the usual roles in the kitchen for one evening, become joint anchors you can return to when the week needs a handle. When you work, boundaries guard your attention from fraying. Begin a block by writing the single outcome you want on an index card you can see. Halfway through, set a short bell to ring. When it does, don't stop the scene. Just glance at the card and confirm you're still inside the intention. End the block by writing one sentence to your future self about where to restart. The bell becomes an oddball inside a predictable arc. The sentences become clean edges on both sides. You'll find that re-entry the next day costs less, and that the block itself felt wider. If interruptions are your reality, make them part of the choreography instead of fights you keep losing. Create a holding place boundary, a small tray or digital note where any intrusion goes the moment it arrives. The act of placing the interruption there is the boundary. It says, not now, but not forgotten. Then have a pre-decided mini-scene later, 10 minutes after lunch, where you process only what's in the holding place. That scene gets its own open and close. What used to be random noise becomes an oddball with a habitat, and chaos shrinks back into shape. One of the gentlest ways to install oddballs is sensory contrast. If your day is mostly screens and straight lines, add one scene with texture and curve. Knead dough, fold a cloth, trace a leaf. If your day is mostly quiet, add a 5-minute rhythm with your hands on a table. If your day is mostly words, walk, and look for patterns without naming them. These contrasts are brief but potent. They reset the palette of attention so the next scene tastes like something instead of nothing. The stronger the contrast, the clearer the boundary, but aim for comfort, not shock. The nervous system learns best when the difference is noticeable and safe. Keep an eye on endings, because memory often keeps the peak and the end. If the peak of a scene was frazzled, you can end gently and rescue the memory. After a stressful call, sit for 30 seconds and breathe with the window open. After a messy chore, wash your hands with attention to temperature and scent. After a dense hour of writing, copy one line you like into a small notebook. These micro-closings are acts of authorship. They decide the color of the last brushstroke, which your future mind will use as the label when it reaches back for how that went. Some days will refuse all plans, and on those days a single boundary can still make the time real. At dusk, step outside and name 3 sounds. It becomes a string you can hold in the dark. Tomorrow, the string will be there again. That's what boundaries do when everything else shifts. They give you something unchanged to push against so that change has a shape. Oddballs can also be stitched into longer rhythms. Choose one recurring oddball for each season. In spring, taste a new herb every Sunday. In summer, watch the first 5 minutes of sunset 3 times a week. In autumn, read a poem aloud on Wednesdays. In winter, learn a new chord on a dark evening. The recurrence makes the oddball a boundary at a bigger scale. The season starts to carry a signature, and the year becomes a quilt with recognizable panels rather than a duvet of one color. Because your attention is finite, don't fill your day with boundaries and oddballs like ornaments on every branch. Too many cuts turn a film into confetti, and too many surprises exhaust the very system you are trying to enliven. A few hinges, a few sparks. That is enough. The editor inside you will use them to carve the day into scenes that breathe, and the archivist inside you will use them to file the scenes in folders you can find. If you like, give yourself a small scene score at night by asking 3 simple questions. Where did a clear beginning happen today? Where did a clear ending happen? And what was the oddest little thing? Write the answers as tiny captions. Window cracked before call. 2-hand laptop close. A single feather on the steps. You are telling your memory exactly which frames to keep. Tomorrow, repeat 1 boundary and invite 1 oddball, and watch how time stops acting like a slick surface and starts acting like a path with stones you can step on without looking down. And as you keep placing those stones, openings you can feel, closings that leave a pleasant aftertaste, small surprises that widen the moment, the rhythm of your days becomes steady enough to hold and flexible enough to stretch, making room for what is about to arrive. Screens invite your attention with 1,000 tiny doors, each promising a moment of interest, and together they create a hallway with no walls. You enter to check one thing: the weather, a message, a headline, and in seconds you are tasting from 10 trays. A notification from a friend, an article fragment, a half-loaded video, a new email, an old memory resurfacing in the feed. Each bite is small, flavorful, easy to swallow. But digestion is another story. The day ends full of tastes and light on nutrients, and time itself feels like it slid past while you were sampling. Multitasking is the server in this busy room, constantly placing new plates before you. It wants you to feel productive by giving you many beginnings. The trouble is that beginnings are expensive and endings are rare, and memory stores scenes best when they have both. Every switch leaves residue. You close a message, but a thread remains unspooled in your mind. Did I phrase that well? You stop in the middle of an article, and your brain keeps a placeholder where the argument should be. You peek at a calendar alert, and your next task is now painted with a faint tint of what's coming at 4. Each residue is small, but together they form a film that fogs the next moment. Time inside residue is thin and fidgety. You count minutes because you can't quite land. You look back later and the day is hard to reconstruct because the editor in your head can't find clean cuts. Everything overlapped everything else. Multitasking shreds attention into fragments that are too small to carry meaning. Your working memory can hold just a few items at once. Pile in a 6th and something falls out, often the thread that made the scene coherent. Screens make it effortless to flip that 6th switch. A new tab, a ping, an animation at the corner of the eye. Each flip asks the brain to reorient. Where am I? What was I doing? What rules apply here? And that reorientation is time you feel as friction. Do it a dozen times in 10 minutes, and the mind protests with a vague hunger you mistake for boredom. Boredom asks for depth. The hunger asks for another taste. If you feed it more tastes, the hunger grows. The blur happens because micro-novelty lacks structure. You encountered hundreds of new things, but they did not belong to scenes with a beginning, middle, and end. Memory is a storyteller. It needs arcs. A single long article read all the way through is a scene. 15 half articles are static. A focused hour on one task creates a plot you can name later. Started here, met a snag, found a way around it, finished this piece. 15 slices of tasks create confetti your mind sweeps up at night and throws away. Screens are not the villain. For many of us, they are the tool and the place we meet the world. The problem is unframed abundance. The cure is framing. You can frame with containers. Decide the shape of a scene before you enter it. 10 quiet minutes to read this whole page. 3 emails to completion. 2 tabs only until this paragraph is done. Containers shrink the hallway into a room with walls you can lean on. The brain relaxes into rules. When a notification arrives, it no longer competes with everything. It bounces off the container's edge. The moment becomes legible again because you know what counts as done. The small triumph of finishing within a container is not trivial. It's a chemical nudge towards satisfaction, which calms the impulse to search for the next taste. You can frame with rarity. Choose one app that you only open twice a day and at fixed times. Announce it to yourself and keep the promise. The first week, your hand will seek that icon automatically and you'll feel the tug. That tug is the ghost of habit, not a true need. When you hold the boundary, the tug weakens and something gentle returns, the capacity to be where you already are. If you cannot limit frequency for practical reasons, limit scope. For messages, decide one cue, respond now, or put it in a short list you trust you'll see later. One cue quiets the brain. It knows there is a page in the book for everything and stops clutching scraps. You can frame with rituals that tell your nervous system, this is a single task scene. Put the phone just out of reach, screen down, sound off. Place one object that signals a mode. A notebook open to a blank half page. A particular mug. A sticky note with one sentence that names the outcome of this block. Start with one breath that's longer on the exhale than the inhale. The ritual takes 20 seconds and buys you 20 minutes of steadier attention. When you end cleanly. Write one line to your future self about where to pick up. Close the object. Flip the phone face up again. This punctuation gives your editor the cut it needs. Multitasking hides inside the screen, even when you think you're not doing it. Having 8 tabs open on the same topic feels like focus, but it is a silent switching cost as your eyes skim the tab bar for reassurance. The mind tries to hold all 8 maps in working memory and drops detail as a result. Try a brief tab diet. Keep 1 tab for the main text, 1 tab for your notes, 1 tab for references you'll browse only when you hit a true question mark you can articulate. If you must save resources for later, use a read later list so the browser itself doesn't become a junk drawer shouting from the corner. The smaller the visual horizon, the larger the felt moment. Notifications are not neutral. They are the opposite of boundaries. They create new scenes for you without asking and scatter the endings of the scenes you chose. Turn off the alerts you do not need in real time. For those you truly must keep, soften them. No banners, no sounds, no buzzing watch unless it is actually urgent. Let some messages arrive silently and wait in the bowl until the time you designated to look into bowls. Your arousal system learns quickly. If the doorbell never rings, it stops tensing for it. If it rings unpredictably, you live in a house where your muscles are always half prepared to stand. Some blur comes from the speed of visual media. Short videos give you peak after peak with no valleys. Peaks feel good. Valleys are where memory does the weaving. After you watch something that delighted you, add a small valley on purpose. Pause, look away. Name one specific thing you liked. A facial expression, a cut, a line. That 10-second naming takes the high-frequency experience and ties one thread into long-term memory. You keep the joy and reduce the smear. Group multitasking deserves its own kindness. In many workplaces, chats are open all day, documents update in real time, meetings overlap. If you can't change the ecosystem, you can change your posture inside it. Use short, explicit statuses. Heads down 25 meters, back at 45 seconds. In review mode, ping, if truly blocking. People relax when they know when you'll surface. Batch responses where possible. Move from one conversation to the next, finishing small loops rather than pecking at all of them. If you're leading, model this restraint so others feel permitted to leave the doorbell off while they do the central work they were hired for. Multitasking mistakes often masquerade as personal flaws. You tell yourself you lack discipline, but the truth is architectural. Your attention lives in a building without doors. So add doors. A timer can be a door if it measures presence rather than pressure. Set a bell for 12 minutes and promise to keep your eyes on a single thing until it rings. 12 minutes is short enough to trust, long enough to enter. When the bell sounds, look up, stretch the focus muscles by gazing at a far point, and choose intentionally another 12 or an ending ritual. You're not chaining yourself to the desk. You are teaching your attention what a room feels like again. Deep reading is a counterweight to the blur. Screens can host deep reading. They simply don't insist on it. Choose one long piece and decide to meet it like a person. No skimming, no skipping to conclusions. The first minutes are the hardest. Your mind, trained on fragments, twitches. Then the cadence of sentences begins to entrain your pace. Paragraphs become a path. Characters and concepts start to hold hands. You will notice time less, not because you escaped, but because you entered. When you finish, close your eyes and summarize the heart of it in 3 lines. That summary makes a hook in memory. Without it, the text may dissolve into the soup of things I glanced at. Email can be a blur machine because it presents infinite threads with similar weight. Give it weight classes. Light, answer in under a minute now or archive. Medium, add to a short list for the day. Heavy, schedule a real scene with a title, draft response on X, and treat it like work, not a thing you'll nibble at between other things. Close the inbox during heavy work. If that sounds impossible, try 10 minutes without it. You'll learn that the building does not burn when you step out of the lobby. The people who truly need you will learn the rhythm you keep and will meet you there. Phones turn idle moments into blurred ones. The queue at the store, the elevator ride, the 5 minutes before a call. These used to be unstructured valleys where the brain idled and stitched. Let some of them return. Stand and let your eyes rest on a fixed point while your breath finds a slow pace. Listen to the texture of the room. Name one color that wasn't obvious at first glance. These tiny spaces are not wasted. They are the loom on which memory keeps up with experience. You're not abandoning your device. You're letting the day have a few unlit stars so the constellations can appear. When you feel the itch to switch, treat it as a signal instead of a command. The signal might mean you need a micro break, not a new task. Drink water, look far, roll your shoulders, breathe out longer than you breathed in. Or it might mean the current scene lacks a clear next action. Write one ridiculously small step. Rename the file. Write the first sentence badly. Draw a box where the diagram will go. Clarity shrinks the itch. If, after that, the itch remains, permit one intentional switch. A chosen scene with its own beginning and end, not a collapse into grazing. Screens can be turned from blur to lens by pairing them with physical anchors. Keep a paper note visible with the title of the scene you're in. Put a small object near your keyboard that you only touch when you're off track. Teach yourself to notice your hand reaching for it as a gentle cue to return. Use a desk light you only turn on for focused work. Switch it off when you're browsing. These cues sound quaint until you try them. Then you feel how hungry your body is for signals that aren't themselves digital. None of this asks you to reject technology or to become a quiet monk in a loud world. It asks you to host your attention the way you would host a good guest. A clear place to sit, a drink within reach, one conversation at a time, a polite sign on the door during the parts that matter. When you treat your attention well, screens become pages, tools, windows again. Multitasking returns to what it's good for, simple, parallel chores with low stakes, while the rest of your life regains its scenes. The day stops being a smear of tabs and starts being a sequence you can name, and later, when you flip through it in your mind, you'll find chapters instead of scraps, whole enough to hold their own weight as you move toward the next moment. You don't need upheaval to feel the day widen. You need small, deliberate differences that give your attention something to hold and your memory something to keep. Think of them as kindnesses to your future self, the one who will reach back and ask, "What was today made of?" Begin softly where you already are. When you wake, let your feet find the floor and name 3 sensations before anything else. The temperature of the air, the first sound you can hear far away, the exact weight of your body on the heels. Open a window for one breath even in winter and listen for distance. Make the first sip of whatever you drink a tiny ceremony. Watch the steam, smell once, taste twice. This adds perhaps 20 seconds to your morning and stretches the first 5 minutes into something with edges. Add a color to the day, Choose it on purpose, or let it choose you. Either way, hunt it kindly wherever it hides. On book spines, fruit stickers, bus seats, the jacket of a stranger, the sheen on a puddle. You're not forcing mindfulness. You are giving your predictive brain a game it enjoys, which keeps it from compressing the morning into the usual. Pair this with one texture to touch carefully: a door frame, a knit sleeve, a leaf. Specifics are time's antidote. They thicken the present the way flour thickens a broth. Make walking a laboratory for small experiments. Take the same route, but shift your pace for 1 block, slower than comfort, then normal again. Count how many different footsteps you hear. Your own, wheels, an animal, something tapping from a window. Walk 1 block looking eye level, 1 block looking at reflections in windows and puddles, 1 block noticing only shadows. If you cannot leave, pace in a small loop and let the loop be the subject. What changes as you pass the same corner 5 times in 5 minutes? The body wants scenes. Movement gives scenes for free. Create single-task islands in the sea of your day. They are short and clearly bounded. 12 minutes to read 1 page without skimming. 6 minutes to wash the dish in your hand with full attention. 8 minutes to write a clumsy paragraph without editing. Use a simple start cue. A sticky note with 1 verb, a kitchen timer, a phone placed face down in another room, and a simple end cue. Close the book with 2 hands. Ring a small bell. Stand and exhale longer than you inhale. Islands work because they promise a return to the mainland. You trust them, so you enter, and when you enter, time stops slipping. Keep a firsts ledger, where only tiny firsts are allowed. First time you notice the neighbor's cat sleeps on the blue car. First time you cooked rice with a pinch of citrus peel. First time you stood on the opposite side of the bus. First time you learned the name of the tree that drops those helicopter seeds. 1 line per first. Big firsts will happen on their own. The ledger is for the humble ones. In a month, you will feel the weeks widen simply because they contain points that are not copies of any other point. Let food be a practical playground. Change 1 small variable and actually notice it. Add 3 mustard seeds to oil before you saute and listen for the crackle. Swap the plate color and see if the food looks cooler or warmer. Eat 1 bite with eyes closed and try to map where on your tongue the taste lands first. If you always drink coffee hot, drink 1 sip after it cools and describe the difference. The point is not gourmet sophistication. The point is attention that is precise enough to survive memory's compression. Make conversation a place where time stretches gently. Ask different questions of the same people. Instead of, "How was your day?" try, "What color did your day feel like? What did your hands do the most today? Did anything small surprise you between breakfast and now?" Offer specifics when you share. The bus smelled like wet wool. I mispronounced a word and made a stranger smile. So the exchange carries anchors. If you live alone, ask yourself aloud once and answer aloud. Hearing your own voice sets a boundary around a moment. Design 3 micro-adventures that cost almost nothing and repeat them irregularly so they remain oddballs. A 10-minute pocket museum where you curate 5 objects in your home around a theme: circles, materials that cool your hand, items with hidden compartments. A 2-song expedition where you step outside and walk until 2 songs end, then return a different way. A threshold survey where you visit all the doorways in your place and notice which ones feel tight, which ones feel open, and why. Each adventure is a different lens. Lenses bend time. Keep a time-thickening pantry of tiny practices to sprinkle when the day thins. On a card or in your notes app, list 10 options. Sketch your mug in 30 lines. Copy a sentence by hand from the nearest book. Count 10 breaths while touching your thumb to each finger in turn. Identify one tree. Trace a shadow with your fingertip. Organize a single drawer. Learn one phrase in a language you don't speak. Read one haiku aloud. Write a haiku about something extremely ordinary. Look at a far horizon for 30 seconds. Choose one without thinking. The pantry prevents the endless deciding that steals minutes and turns novelty into effort. Blend analog into digital on purpose. When you start a screen task, write the task's title by hand at the top of a small card and place it beside the keyboard. That card is a silent companion, reminding you that this is a scene. When your attention wanders, tap the card once and read the title. When you finish, draw a tiny symbol, star, dot, spiral, and put the card in a small box you will eventually recycle. The act of keeping the box for a week lets the week have weight. It is surprisingly relieving to see what hours were made of, rendered in quiet ink. Make light your collaborator. Stand in morning light for 30 seconds if it exists that day. Watch the color of the sky at the same time each evening for a week. Light a candle only during one task. Switch one lamp to a warmer bulb and let that light mean soft work. The eyes and the nervous system take these cues seriously. When light changes, the inner editor senses a scene change, and you get to keep the middle of the day instead of losing it to blur. Invent one, begin a minute daily. Pick a skill so small it's almost silly. Balancing on one foot while brushing your teeth, drawing a cube in perspective, whistling, rolling a coin across your fingers, saying your street names backward, learning the first chord of a song, practicing the pen, flourish you envy, tying a different knot. Spend 1 minute badly. The brain loves beginner signals. They tell it to sample densely and to make new connections. A minute is short enough to sidestep perfectionism and long enough to leave a bright mark. Schedule a Sabbath hour whenever you can, a single hour with no inputs designed to tug. No headlines, no messages, no lists. The hour can hold anything that doesn't demand answers. Walking, staring, stretching, sorting a small pile, listening to a record all the way through. If an anxious itch arrives, write the worry on a slip of paper and tuck it under something heavy. The hour's value is not moral or austere, it's mechanical. It gives your inner archivist time to file the day's papers so your desk, the mind you live in, clears enough to notice the next scene. Use your phone to slow time instead of speed it. Assign a single wallpaper that only appears during focus, a solid color or a simple shape, and a different one for drifting. Change it manually when you switch modes. Tuck distracting icons into a folder with an honest name. Later, not now. Set one alarm that repeats daily as a return bell to whatever matters in that hour, not to scold, but to shepherd. Take exactly one photo on days you remember to. Not a portrait, not an achievement, just a texture you would otherwise ignore. Peeling paint, a shadow ladder, light on cut fruit. At night, look at the one photo for 10 seconds and then put the phone down. Small rituals domesticate the device. Try 3 nouns per scene while you work. When you begin a block, silently choose 3 concrete words that capture the atmosphere you want. Quiet, steady, clear, or bright, curious, patient. Write them somewhere visible. They give your attention a tone to aim for. When the tone fades, you notice sooner. At the end, jot 3 nouns that describe what actually happened: messy, brave, finished, and move on. These tiny labels teach your memory the distinctions it otherwise erases. Fold movement into stuck moments. Anytime a page, tool, or idea resists you for more than a minute, stand and rotate your eyes slowly left to right and back 3 times. Then look far away and then close for 1 breath. Shake your hands. Roll your ankles. Drink a glass of water. These are not productivity hacks. They are physiology. The small reset changes the sampling rate of your senses and lets the next minute arrive as a new scene rather than the tail of the last one. Plant seasonal signatures that return each year with gentle predictability. In early spring, learn the names of 3 blossoms on your street. In summer, choose 1 evening each week for a slow walk at the edge of sunset and listen for the first insect call. In autumn, keep a shallow bowl for small leaves and twigs with beautiful defects and empty it at the solstice. In winter, sit by a window with a warm drink and watch your breath fog the glass for 1 minute, drawing a tiny shape with your fingertip. These signatures are time's landmarks. They slow the year without insisting on grand events. Keep an index card diary rather than a heavy journal if writing feels like another task. 1 index card per day, 3 short lines. 1 sensory fact, 1 small kindness you gave or received, 1 novelty. File the cards by month with a paperclip. When a month ends, shuffle through them. You will see at a glance that the weeks were not empty. If you prefer sound, record an audio whisper of 10 seconds with the same 3 items. If you prefer drawing, make 4 boxes and sketch stick figures of 4 scenes. The form doesn't matter. The repeatable, low-friction practice does. Let errands become micro-pilgrimages. Choose a different door to enter the store. Ask the cashier 1 sincere question about their day and actually listen. Carry your bag in the opposite hand and notice how the weight changes your posture. On the way home, stop for 60 seconds where you never stop and look at what nobody looks at. Backs of buildings, undersides of staircases, the way weeds map cracks in the pavement. It is not romanticizing, it is attention farming. When you feel crushed by sameness, take a tiny risk you can reverse. Wear a color you never wear and go on with your day. Sit in the front row or the last row. Start the meeting with a question instead of an update. Cook breakfast for dinner or dinner for breakfast. Write the email in 1 sentence first. Small risk engages the system without exhausting it. It stamps the page with an oddball that doesn't explode the schedule. Seed your spaces with attention stones, small objects that invite a pause. A smooth pebble by the sink that you turn once when you wash your hands. A feather on the desk you lift before you open a new tab. A postcard on the bookshelf you flip every Sunday. Your hands will remember before your mind does. These tiny touches are boundaries without effort. Practice. Slow looking for 90 seconds a day. Choose an ordinary object, the toaster, a shoe, a houseplant, and look at it as if you were tasked with drawing it later. Count edges. Notice scratches. Trace curves with your eyes. This is both art training and time training. When you look slowly, seconds dilate because they're full. Later, memory keeps the scene because it had structure. You started at the corner, you circled, you found the chip in the paint. Carry a question for a week. Not a heavy one. Something like, what are the shapes of today's clouds? Where does water gather here? How many locks do I use between waking and sleeping? Which sounds repeat at noon? What is the oldest thing my hand will touch? The question keeps you companioned. You don't answer it once. You collect small iterations. The brain loves this. It gives you a thread to pull through hours that would otherwise slide. All of these are small. That is the point. Small is repeatable. Repeatable becomes familiar. Familiar becomes a doorway you can step through without fuss, so you use it. And the day acquires edges and sparks. Over time, you notice that you are less hungry for distraction because your hours taste like something. You notice that you can point to a morning and say what it was like, not just what you did. You notice that the calendar grid begins to show topography, little hills and paths and clearings made entirely from gentle, specific acts that asked very little and gave you back a sense that minutes are places you can live in and not just distances you must cross. Evening is when the day loosens its grip and your hands can shape it. Think of the last hour before sleep as a quiet studio where you take the raw material of hours, sharp edges, blurred middles, bright bursts, and press them into a form your memory can keep. The goal is simple: unblur the day just enough that tomorrow doesn't have to carry its leftovers. 5 to 15 minutes is plenty. The ritual is not another task to perform, but a soft boundary, a way of telling your nervous system, this scene is closing. Boundaries make time legible. When the closing is kind and consistent, nights learn to fold the day neatly instead of shoving it into a drawer. Make a doorway for the ritual so your body recognizes it. Dim a single lamp and turn off overheads. Choose one sound that always begins this scene. The click of the lamp chain, the scratch of a match, a single bell on your phone set to silent vibrate that you feel in your palm. Sit where you don't sit for work. Wrap something around your shoulders or over your knees to shift posture from doing to keeping. If you like scent, introduce a mild, steady one you only use at night. Cedar, a hint of citrus, a whisper of lavender. Your senses learn these cues quickly. After a few evenings, the routine will start on its own as soon as the lamp changes the color of the room. Start with 3 concrete moments from the day and give each a single, specific sentence. Not a summary, not a moral, just a fact with texture. The mug left an oval of steam on the window. The bus driver whistled something that wobbled between 2 notes. A friend's message used the word steadfast, and I felt my shoulders drop. Treat these like you are labeling jars in a pantry. Specific labels keep items from blending. They also teach your memory what to save. If it helps, pick one from the morning, one from the middle, one from the evening, so the whole arc gets edges. If the day felt difficult, let one moment be gentle on purpose, any tiny thing that did not hurt. This is not denial. It's giving the archivist inside you something steady to file alongside the hard parts. Add a short scene index, draw a line the width of an index card, and mark the day with quick ticks. Wake, work start, walk, call, meal, small break, finish, rest. Put a star at any oddball, something unexpected that deserves to stand out. You are not grading the day. You're sketching its shape so tomorrow can find the file. The act takes less than a minute and gives your mind a map. Later, when you flip back through a week, the stars will pull your eyes and restore color to hours that would otherwise smear into busy. Close open loops without doing them. Write down any unfinished tasks and ask each one a single question. Is this mine? And if yes, what is the smallest next visible action? Put only the smallest next actions on a shortlist for tomorrow and move the rest to a trusted later container you actually consult. Then, and this is the hinge, whisper, not tonight. Your brain wants to spin to keep you safe. Written promises, let it off duty. If a thought returns, point to the page. The ritual's faithfulness, not its length, convinces the mind to set the load down. Name one thing you learned and one thing you would briefly try differently. Keep both tiny. Learned that my first paragraph needs a verb earlier. Next time, open the window before the call. Learning shrinks vague unease. It converts a big, foggy, today was messy into a specific knob you can turn. Variation keeps novelty alive without agitation. You're telling the predictive brain there will be gentle change, not chaos, tomorrow. Plant a tomorrow seed. Choose one small, novel thing for the morning. Not a demand, a seed. Stand barefoot on the balcony for one breath. Use the blue mug. Take the back stair. Write it at the bottom of the card and place the card where your morning hand will find it. This is not a productivity trick. It is a way to give the next day a crisp first boundary and prevent the slide back into autopilot. The seed should be so small you could do it half asleep. Offer the body a closing gesture. 2 or 3 slow exhales, slightly longer than inhales. A scan from the crown of your head to your toes, where you name 3 places you notice warmth or weight. Roll your shoulders forward, then back. Bring your jaw forward, then let it settle, and touch your tongue lightly to the roof of your mouth to cue the rest and digest system. If your hands are restless, run warm water over them and notice the exact moment when warmth turns to neutral. This is physiology, not poetry. When you help the body settle, the mind follows. If you prefer sound to paper, keep an evening whisper recording that never exceeds 30 seconds. Say your 3 sentences, your 1 learning, your tomorrow seed. Date will be automatic. Listening back at the week's end gives you a time lapse that is surprisingly calming. The voice becomes an anchor more durable than a list of achievements. If you prefer drawing, box the page into 4 squares and sketch 4 symbols: a circle for a conversation, a wave for a walk, a triangle for a challenge, a dot for something you noticed. Symbols compress without erasing. The future you will remember the scenes they point to. Give endings a color. Turn one lamp to a warm hue you only use in the last half hour. Our eyes are honest reporters. Light tells the brain where it is in the day. Pair the color with the slowest possible task, folding a small stack of cloth, arranging items on a tray, washing a single dish by hand. Completing a tiny tactile loop becomes the end memory the brain keeps when it compresses the day. Instead of the last sharp notification, the last remembered piece is your hand on a smooth plate, the quiet lift of foam, the click of porcelain on wood. If screens were loud, apply a blue smear remedy. After your 3 sentences, look at 3 unmoving things for 10 seconds each. An object with grain, an object with a curve, an object with a shadow. Name 1 detail on each you hadn't seen before. Then, with eyes closed, replay the noisiest screen scene, but reduce it to verbs and nouns only, like a caption. Scrolled headlines, laughed once, closed tab. Don't ingest more. Reduce what's already in you so the archive can file it. For anxious nights, create a worry box with a lid. Keep slips of paper beside it. When the mind presents a what if, write exactly 1 sentence and drop it in. Then put something with weight on the lid. A book, a stone, a mug. Say the day and time you will open it. Tomorrow at 4, I'll read you. And return to your ritual. Anxiety is honest energy with nowhere to go. A box is a destination. If a worry returns, point again and say the appointment out loud. The repetition is not silliness. It is training your predictive brain to trust the boundary. Invite gratitude, but make it structural. Instead of, I'm grateful for family, write, my sister's voice rose at the end of the sentence when she said my name. Instead of, I'm grateful for work, write, someone wrote, thank you for the clear note. And I kept the words open on my screen for a minute. Specific gratitude attaches to scenes. General gratitude floats away. Aim for one line. The ritual is not a test of virtue, but a technique for legible memory. Wrap the day with a title. Title it like a chapter you might want to find later, 7 words or fewer. Rain on the bus, cinnamon on toast. The call under the window with wind. 3 false starts, 1 clean line. Titles are handles. Handles turn vague days into graspable chapters. If you do nothing else, a title is enough to slow the slide. Place 1 small object on a tray as a token of the day. Ticket stub, sticky note with a word that mattered. A leaf from the walk. A paperclip bent into a shape by accident. Empty the tray weekly into a box. The accumulation is proof against the feeling that time dissolved. It's a material record of scenes, humble and persuasive. Objects speak when memory is quiet. Use a memory palace seed if you enjoy imagery. Choose 3 familiar places in your home. A doorway, a shelf, a chair. Assign your 3 moments to each place with a silly, vivid image that won't stick anywhere else. The mug's steam becomes a small cloud parked above the door frame. The whistle becomes a pencil bird on the shelf. The word steadfast is carved into the chair leg. The silliness is a feature. The more unusual, the easier the recall. Tomorrow, when the day starts to smear, you can glance at the door and recover a cloud. If your schedule is irregular or you're caring for someone and nights are unpredictable, treat the ritual as a pocket close. It can be 2 minutes at a sink, 1 minute beside a crib, 30 seconds in a parked car. Speak the 3 sentences out loud if writing is impossible. Touch a cool surface. Count 1 slow exhale. Hide a small card and pencil in a coat, a bag, a cookbook. The ritual's power comes from repetition, not from the perfect setting. In chaotic seasons, even a single sentence becomes a hinge the day can swing on. Close, with a gentle preview, rather than a plan. Pick the first small move of tomorrow you know you'll meet. Pour water into the kettle. Put on shoes. Open the window. Picture yourself doing that one simple act with your present posture, not a heroic version of you. This handshake with tomorrow prevents the morning from opening as a blur. It gives your body a script, so your mind doesn't have to write one while half awake. Set out one object that makes the handshake visible. Kettle on the stove. Shoes turned outward. The window key on the sill. For those who create, add a last line practice. Copy the last sentence you wrote, played, designed or decided onto a small card and write one next possible sentence even if you won't use it. Creativity's enemy is cold start. A next sentence is a warm ember you can blow on. Leave the card where tomorrow's work will begin. Your sleeping brain will work on it without your supervision. Morning will feel like returning to a conversation rather than starting one. End the scene with a consistent phrase spoken softly to yourself. A phrase that belongs only to this moment. That will do. Or close the book. Or we keep what we can. It sounds simple because it is. The nervous system responds to repeated, paired signals, dim light, slower breath, the same words. These become the keys that tell the gates to close in the right order, so rest can start its work. Sleep is not an off switch. It is an overnight archivist. If you give it labeled folders and a clean desk, it files faster and finds more later. When you finally turn toward the bed, leave one light on long enough to climb in calmly, then click it off with intention. Feel the darkness arrive as another boundary, not a void. If thoughts try to spool again, return to your 3 sentences without adding new ones. Read them once, silently, see the images they point to, and let them fade. They have done their job. They have marked the edges. You do not need to hold the day anymore. The archive will hold it for you while the next scene gathers quietly on the other side of sleep.